updated from time to time about what we've learned. As you're aware, we now have consultants that are assisting us. What they call the final rules came out in around mid-January, and we've had a chance to meet with each commissioner to talk about some of those rule changes. And so because of the finalization of those rules, it may place a different perspective on how the commission may choose to allocate what we have available. And so we've had some conversations about that. There is an opportunity because of those rules to allow for some more general governmental type expenses, some of the expenses that we've talked about in some of our strategic planning retreats and the like could be eligible. And so Mike Brossart's going to kind of walk us through just a quick refresher, and then we do have some folks here from the consultant to help us out as we have the discussion from the commission as to if you want to keep things as you've decided, if you want to make amendments to that, and then as you will recall in some of those discussions, if there are subrecipients involved, that becomes a little more difficult in the tracking, and therefore there's more cost associated with that. But if we decide, or the commission decides, to fund some of the initiatives previously discussed, then we're going to have to start talking about, well, what's going to be involved in that. So for instance, is there going to be a threshold amount that each applicant could receive? Discussions that we're going to need to have to finalize that. So with that, I'll turn it over to our Finance Director, Mike Brossart, for the general presentation.
Good morning. Afternoon. Yes. Sorry. I've got a couple, three folks here. Deidre is our resident expert. She is flying back today, and so I don't know that she'll be here. She and Earl, one of our chief accountants, Earl Morse, has been heavily involved in the ARPA. All the learning that's gone on behind the scenes. They've been working with a number of folks from KPMG, but primarily Samantha and Amy from KPMG, who are here from Tallahassee and Wisconsin for us today. What we're going to do is we're just going to walk you through some thoughts that I had as to what we'd like to have accomplished in the day. So we're going to, obviously we need to walk out of here, we staff need to walk out of here with clear guidance on how to distribute the remaining monies, okay? So I'll show you what the original list was that you had provided to us prior to the feds making the changes, allowing for up to $10 million of losses being recognized as undesignated and being able to be used for general governmental expenses, okay? And then once you give us clear guidance on that, we'll then walk through the next steps, okay? Originally, this is what you had defined for us. It's this is how much we're getting, $22 million. The wastewater and the Web EOC are two that you recognize that we've talked about that are either spent and committed or already spent. Consultants, this is already spent. So what? I'm
sorry, Mike, I apologize. Would you repeat that one more time? Which parts are already?
Well, let me just go to the next slide.
Okay.
These amounts, this is, and again, what we've spent already has already been spent. We can't do anything about that. Anything else, you have the ability, as long as it's within the parameters of how we spend it, you can give us clear guidances to move forward in a different direction. You can, okay? We've already spent the money on this. We've already spent half of this, okay? These monies have not been spent because we don't have clear guidance as to how to move forward with defining the applications, because we need to have better feedback from the seven of you, okay? The consultants, this is a not to exceed for the first phase of KPMG assisting us with the development of the rules, okay? However, since that time, during one-on-one discussions, what we learned was that, and again, this is why we want to kick it back to you in a moment, is it sounded like there was an appetite from many of you to channel much, if not all of this, into general governmental expenses for this next budget cycle to use on other things, okay? But that is for the 7 of you to give us clear guidance, okay? If for some reason you want us to leave any monies in any one of these, then what we're going to do is we're going to walk down through a list of questions for each one of those 4, okay? And from that, we'll have you tell us the amount, and then we're going to go into a great level of detail of exactly how it's distributed, first come, first serve, whatever it is. And then the ladies are here to guide us and keep us on the rails of what we can and can't do with yes and no answers, okay? So I'm not going to go through this yet, because what I'd like to do is, if possible, find out from you if you would like to discuss these amongst yourself. And if so, if you'll remember during the one-on-ones, we actually had a spreadsheet. Now, I say, what I originally showed you was the original amount. Since that time, we know that KPMG's not to exceed for phase 2 is 450. So this undesignated has changed from the original, and you all have seen this from the one-on-ones. Okay, this is exactly what you saw before. And you also have the PED connectivity analysis and some neighborhood programming in there as well. So for right now, if you want, you can talk amongst yourself, and if you want us to change any of these amounts, we can. So at that point, I'd like to kick it back to yes, sir.
So KPMG's second phase, which is a large number, so we're at $500,000.
Well, yes, it is. And here's why. Because they don't know, neither do we, what it is you're going to ask us to do for distribution and tracking and monitoring, right? As we talked about, this goes down exponentially the less tracking and monitoring that they have to do.
The more universal simplicity we provide.
For example, if you took all this, just as an example, very simplistic example, if you took everything in red here and everything that's in red here and you put it into a brand new qualified wastewater project, likely we're not going to have much of anything in phase 2 from them, because theoretically we can track all that ourselves. That's not a suggestion, just a very simplified way of explaining what phase 2 looks like.
And so that's back to a lot of the more sub-recipients that each one of those could be provided to, the more tracking is involved, and that's where the costs go up.
So, and I'm just going to try to tee it up for you. One of the things that we talked about with the 7 of you in the one-on-ones is, during the retreat, you heard from the police chief and the fire chief about potential needs coming to this next year, okay? The capital needs associated with those requests are eligible, I just confirmed that with the ladies, are eligible if you wanted to, if during the budget cycle you said, okay, we don't want to use some of these, whatever it is, and you want to move it to undesignated, we can use those monies towards purchase of police vehicles, safety equipment for them, working for, buying the fire truck, those kinds of things, if in fact you chose to do that. Now, we're not looking for that today. I would assume if in fact you choose to direct any of these down here to the undesignated, then that's something that the city manager would bring back to you during the budget cycle, that then you, the 7 of you, can talk about how you want us to spend those monies during the budget cycle. That's not something we're asking for today. We just need guidance on the ARPA monies.
So you wanted us to discuss that amongst ourselves?
Please, yes, ma'am.
Mayor?
Yes, sorry. I'm studying the list.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm thinking Commissioner.
I'll go first.
Right.
I think about it a little bit because people talk to me. There again, let's address affordable housing for a minute. There again, let's say that we want to do affordable housing, and we budgeted for Pintos. Now we'll have to pay them. Now we'll have to buy Mercedes to give them the same thing. And there again, I think that money could be used somewhere else, maybe more efficiently, in the next coming year or two because prices are not going to decrease. And I think that we could have a bigger bang for our money in maybe some of these other areas because, granted, we need affordable housing, but there's no affordable housing to be got. We can't really assist enough to make a difference because of affordable housing. And if we want you to have a car, but the only cars available is a Mercedes. That's the way I'm looking at it. So that's my perspective. So that's my point on that particular issue. The rest of them I really don't have. The small business, I think that's a very critical component. They know what we need for the city. We can help them. The cultural arts, I know that's a big thing. I can't touch that. And so that's my, and of course, affordable housing is going to be hard to track depending on how you do it. But anyway,
I get you. Yep.
Can I respond to the affordable?
No, somebody else is going to go first. I'm kidding.
Well, just to that topic, the way I look at that is that's $6 million, not $1 million, or almost $7 million, because affordable housing is the one thing we get a 6-to-1 lever on by matching it with P3s that build far more than we could build with that $1 million. So it's an additional $1 million of incentives we provide to get lots more done. It isn't affordable housing for the purpose of making housing affordable. It's for that niche market.
Well, I concur, but you understand what I'm saying,
Yes,
too.
no, I do too, but there isn't anything up there that'll multiply like that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, that's when we do 1 million, it's 6.5, 7.
Well, we can't guarantee that, though.
No, we can only look at our history.
And history's a lot different past than it is right now.
Right, but
anyway.
we also don't have to approve a project that would use those monies that we didn't find had those kinds of returns available to us. I'll say Commissioner Matt.
Well, and just, I don't know if this is going to be a little bit more dynamic. Do we collect all of our thoughts, or do we go more dynamically on each?
Let's collect
Like,
thoughts.
Okay, because my initial is just in response to this exact, conversation, but I have some other thoughts. So just on this, if you think about today's 15 units that were just in the CRA RFP to try to say, can you give us 10% of the, which is difficult, for the developers with the supply chain and with the prices, right? But to me, what I feel like we've found over the last 4.5 years as a best practice is to be able to get the true leverage and building costs aside is when our developers who are qualified to go get those state and federal dollars, they need city dollars to be able to qualify to get those state and federal dollars. So it's not so much of does 1 million buy 10 units today and 4 tomorrow and 17, 2 years from now. It's more, does that green, what are the companies, green
Green Mills.
Green Mills, does Green Mills make it through the round to get the state and federal dollars because they know they've got this allocated. So to me, I'm non-negotiable on the $1 million for affordable housing only because if we have a Green Mills who says, yes, we've got land, we want to move, and they need our participation at a certain level to get those state and federal funds, I don't want to miss my moment. So I can totally concur with building price and when we built, Lincoln Square and even today's 15 units, we're paying a lot, for things right now with the price of building. But I don't want to miss because we're going to need affordable, today and every day, probably for the next decade. I don't want to miss my moment by not having those funds allocated. So to give the predictability to those developers who qualify for those state and federal funds. So to me, that is a tracking issue. It's not giving vouchers. I think on the next slide, Mike's going to show us a lot of different ways to give money to affordable housing. I feel like, and I would like to hear from, concurrence from my colleagues, that it's more to be there ready for a developer to use to get the state and federal funds. So we get an entire project of affordable rather than nickel and diming, on a little voucher here and a project here and 5 units here. So, that's kind of how I think of it when I think of the affordable housing in that.
While you're up, are there any other items you want to touch base on?
Yeah, to me, I wanted to ask the question if the $250,000 for the cultural arts could be a part of the expansion at the current expansion at the museum.
They would have to apply for it.
But I mean, according to the rules of the dollars.
It's got to be a nonprofit, but I think it's up to you as to whether you say we want it all to go to one group or to,
Right.
because I think we have to put it, and I'm going to let the ladies kind of confirm, but if you're going to give the money to the community, isn't there an application process? Or can you designate just one group gets it and that's that?
You can designate it.
Okay, you can.
That would actually be city.
Okay.
The capital there would just be city. But the history,
This
No,
is for
this
cultural,
is the whole
there's an
museum.
expansion to the museum. of art.
Museum.
We're going to do a 10 million
okay, not
expansion.
the library. Okay,
Right,
gotcha.
Old Museum Art,
So
right.
this would be our 250
So
company.
we can give 250 to a museum, is what you're saying, ladies.
Museum of Art.
Yes. Is that a yes? The smile I can't
You're not
tell.
giving me guidance.
Is that
I mean, all you do is give me answer my
I was
question.
just going to ask
Yeah.
about the Museum of Art. It's I assume it's a city-owned museum.
No. It's a 501c3 standalone organization.
And they're just expanding.
They're building a new building.
The blueprint.
It's a Smithsonian affiliate, and it's expanding, so they're doing a capital campaign
Capital
right
campaign.
Okay.
Will they, we've got spend down requirements. So if we give them the money, if we obligate it by 24 and give it to them by 26, is that good enough, or do they have to have spent it by 26?
You have to
They have to have expended it by 26, so there's a,
They can.
okay.
I think they should be
when
groundbreaking
we-
by the end of the year.
But just remember, any of these things, if we give the money out, we need to have, this is more for Palmer, we need to have a clawback in there that we can, at the last minute,
Yeah.
get the money back and use it for our own general governmental if we have to, right? For anything that we're committed to.
And could we, so first, is it allowed? Second, I would imagine giving one bulk sum to is simplifying the price of the Phase 2 KP.
No question,
Okay,
no question.
thank you.
We like simplifying.
We support.
So just because you're going to see some of the interactions with the consultants, for the most part today, they can kind of give us yes and no type answers. They can't, because of some of the guidelines associated with the rules, they can't really give us a great deal of guidance or influence. So a lot of times we're going to be figuring out how to ask the question just so they can nod yes or no for the most part.
And if they're staring at me, it just means I'm not asking it the right way.
Got it.
So I'm just coming into this meeting, do my own personal homework. My personal ask would be $1 million for affordable housing and $250,000 for the capital campaign for the Pope Museum of Art expansion. And then the others, I'm open to hearing whatever my colleagues have to say, but those are my two highest priorities.
And how much did you say for Pope Museum of Art?
The $250,000 that's in the cultural arts.
Can I just clarify, though, really quick on that? Just because I thought when we originally talked about this in ARPA funds, it was recovery, more of a recovery methodology. So for organizations that are part of the Mayor's Council on the Arts, that would be our overarching umbrella that could disperse those funds and grants to the nonprofits that do cultural arts in the area who are hit by
Yes.
the
COVID situation.
COVID situation.
We did.
So,
We talked about
okay, so that would be,
Yes.
I'll reserve the rest of mine. I just want that to be a clarifying point.
In fact, to that end, you could make it 250 net
But
of
to me,
that.
yeah, so I feel like that was initially what these funds were for, and you
Yes.
saw me argue those funds be released earlier.
Yep.
To me, we're past COVID, and so, and now it takes tracking, nickel and diming, all of those efforts. So I'm one person of seven. My personal is to see a bigger bang for my buck and as little bureaucracy and following and consulting needed to track it. So, that's just me. Same thing with the small businesses. I'm thinking they probably got funds somewhere else right now. So I'm just one person. This is just my opinion. We're all just giving our opinion. Going to the chamber and giving to small businesses. I mean, I think we've recovered. COVID is in the rearview mirror. I'd rather leverage every dollar as best I can and see some brick and mortar, to see some things that we've really done that are constructive going forward. But that's just me. That's just my personal preference.
Commissioner Walker.
Thank you. Since we're making our preferences and sharing our laws as we are, I would like to still see the $250,000 stay for cultural arts and support for those entities or those the mayor and council of arts programs or groups that may need support. I would agree. We have moved beyond COVID, but as we move beyond COVID, those groups may still need support. If they do, then that's why I think I initially said, hey, let that be what it's for and support them along the way. And I would remain in that position because I don't know. There could still be support needed from these groups, and I know arts is important. I mean, to me, for our community. So.
And if there is, it's probably not very material, nearly as material as the number.
I don't know. I can't say. I don't know.
I don't either.
It could still be there. I am challenged by knowing, as we were shared with during our time strategic planning, where our needs will be for public safety, as it would be, as at risen for both fire and police. And I knew, even looking at that and what we want to move forward with, the mindset of maybe having to go along with Avalon kind of increase to support that. But if there's dollars to help bring that or soften that particular situation that can be used from this,
Sure.
tell me. Because I would think public safety is more important for all of us, at least for me anyway. And that's where I would probably want to land. Then maybe, again, I do have a need to have as much as we can to support affordable housing. Yes, I agree with you, my dear colleague. The Blue Skies and the Green Mills, whoever they are, and I know when they go make those applications, as we know, they look at what maybe the local community has done, or is doing, and what kind of buy-in is coming. So if we have dollars to support what they can move forward with to make application to have more of our affordable housing units being built, I'm there too as well. So that's my take at this point.
Commissioner Music.
Yeah, and bear with me as I try to walk through this, still being the greenest here.
It benefits us all, trust me.
Well, so I look at it like this. You know, my wife and I, like many of you here, started our business ourselves and didn't borrow money, and we just did. So I'm looking at this as found money, for the lack of a better term in my world. So if my wife and I had, at a certain stage in our life, found a large chunk of money, and we didn't have kids in college, we didn't have kids in private school, we didn't have some of these things, we might go out and buy a second home or a boat or something, a big vacation. But if we have kids in college, if we have those things, we're going to look and say, the best thing we can do with this money, even though it's not fun money, is to apply it towards that. To echo a little bit your closing statement, that's where I would sit. I don't think that anything on that list isn't worth servicing with dollars. But we are going to, based on the information that we got at our strategic planning, is we've got some serious money that's going to have to be spent. And we have money right now that's not going to cost us anything. If we go and spend this on the cultural arts, on the things that we want to do, and you're right, the leveraging we can get with the private-public partnerships is tremendous. But we're going to have to go to our citizens and say, here's what the police chief's saying, here's what the fire chief is saying, we're going to have to raise your rent, as it were. Right? And I don't want to have to do that when I'm sitting and looking money. Now, there's more than just that initial money, right? We've got to buy the station, but then we've got to service it every year. So I know that there are still those kind of things, right? But we have this money sitting there, and it's a whole lot simpler to not use their services for nitpicky stuff if it's these big projects. I would be hard pressed to wrap my head around how can we, because so many of those things have existed before us, will exist after us through the public, through partnerships with businesses and individuals that were willing to contribute to Bonnet Springs, to the museum and things like that. So that's where I don't know why all of that isn't swept right off the table and just put into where it is needed, not where we want it.
Well, and to that end, I would think that both, when we look at our public service money, that we're trying to, safety money that we're trying to spend versus the affordable housing. Both of those are very needed because, when we were in Boise, and this is, not to overuse Boise as an example, but they're similar to us in a lot of regards. The biggest difficulty they have is they have people moving in there from other markets, just like they are into Florida, who have the capacity to spend and are undaunted by the dollars housing costs. You only dampen that by having enough housing. So we have to have enough housing in place to make the supply and demand curves work. So when you look at when I look at public safety and affordable housing, those to me are almost equal priorities in terms of the dollars. And everything else is.
But if we put ourselves in a position where we have to raise our ad valorem, then we are ostensibly making affordable housing less affordable because now their property taxes are more. And I know that we're talking about, for us, we're talking about just a little bit, but we are taking both of those up.
Right, but you're creating a lowered pressure on market as you have more places for people to be able to live.
I guess what I would want if I was going to get behind the affordable housing aspect of it is give me some numbers, right? What does this money leveraged with PPP, what does it look like?
We can do that historically, what we've done. So that's doable. But I agree 100% on everything we can reduce.
Yes.
First of all, how much does our, Marcia Fox give us for our increase? Sorry, Marcia. Secondly, then, how much can we pour in money to offset the additional expenses? And then whatever we have left, if we have to do a millage increase, is what's left because we threw as much money as we could. No different than your example of kids in college.
Okay.
McLeod.
Oh, yes. How are you doing down there?
I'm good. It was the first time I raised my hand, so you're good. You didn't miss me. Yeah, a couple of thoughts. It's a different picture than what we had when we first took a first pass at this. And so I do think it changes, not knowing that now we have eligible uses that we didn't have several months or a year ago. And as we pointed out, a lot of these organizations have moved past COVID. So maybe the urgency, the dire need that we felt the last time we went through this isn't necessarily here today. And then as Commissioner Music said, these are all good causes. And so it's hard, I think, to say, well, if we pull away from this, are we saying that we don't prioritize this area? But I think with the pressing public safety needs that we have and that are coming, I think all of these categories in red should be on the table for reallocation. And to see, we don't have to decide that today, but from my point of view, it would be helpful to see scenarios of what if we took that put it in the undesignated funds, what can we do with that in our public safety needs? And looking at the value of that $1 million for affordable housing. And I get it, there's reservation about, okay, are we placing less of a priority on that if we pull that $1 million out of that allocation? But how far can we go with that $1 million if we leave it in for affordable housing as housing continues to increase? And how much are we really making an impact? Or would it be better spent on public safety needs? So that's where I am at the moment. I think all the categories in red we should take a look at reallocating, given what we know is coming and that the picture has changed.
Commissioner McCarthy.
So just my thoughts, because my last comment was clarification. So a couple things, and I said this in my one-on-one meeting too. I feel like we procedurally have already agreed on all of this. So to revisit it, I feel like makes us look like we're kicking the can down the road to the public of one more time the government's just going to hit the pause and not do what they said they were going to do. And they've already said they were going to support ARPA funds to be distributed in this way. And I don't know, I think we're making an assumption that people are through COVID. I think that, especially in the nonprofit world, that those ripple effects of that on someone that's already lean and mean organization, I don't know that we can make that assumption. Obviously, I'm passionate about the cultural arts. That's something I'm really passionate about, the neighborhood programming, because I feel like neighborhoods are the bread and butter of the community, and the more we can impact in that area, the better off we're going to be from a public safety standpoint and a community and quality of life standpoint. Because if you know your neighbors and everybody is getting along, then you have less impacts that are ripple effect from a philosophical standpoint, where they have good relationships with the police and fire, and they support one another, and they're the front line of defense almost in helping one another out. If you want to put a little bit of something, and I don't think $100,000 in that regard is a lot of money. So other things, I agree with the affordable housing piece that we can leverage that. What I asked in my one-to-one meeting, and then I'll ask again here, is we're looking at $22 million when I don't know that we have cut and managed our budget in another way fiscally, where there might be other cuts elsewhere in the organization as a whole. So from a conservative point of view, before we start talking about a millage increase, we need to be assured that we are clean and that we are as good stewards, great stewards with our tax dollars that we have before we take money that was for, this COVID relief and reapply it. Do I want public safety? Absolutely. I think everything should be funded for the fire department, the police department, what they were asked and what they've asked of us. But I don't know that this is the place to do it. I think if we could all negotiate that list down, I don't want to sweep it, as Commissioner McLeod just suggested, but if we could come to an agreement. I get very bothered by process and the fact that we're talking about it again when we already talked about it and we all agreed on the topics that are on that screen. Yes, the world's changed, but how much has it changed? And is that a hypothesis on our part? Because we haven't really asked the community if it's changed and if they're still suffering. We've just made that assumption because we're not wearing masks anymore. So I think those are some of the things that we really need to consider. And again, I'm happy to negotiate all of those things, even the cultural arts coming off the table a little bit, but I feel like as a public steward of money, that I feel very two-faced to say, hey, we have this, and look, we allocated this in strategic plan, and we talked about this, and this is where we're going, and now the rules have changed from the federal government, so we're like, oh, we're just going to sweep the whole thing and put it over in this socket. So that's where I'm struggling. That's not a judgment. It's just I'm struggling to reconcile that in my own mind and knowing what the broad picture of the whole. It's hard to know what the whole budget is, but where are there gaps? I feel like we are efficient, but are we at the utmost efficiency before we start talking about a millage increase?
Always. That's always the drive. And the only response I would make, other than the COVID related to ours, and that number being whatever we might want to address.
I mean, all of them. They might have a ripple effect still, even small business.
But we have another set of rules we didn't have before. So we have broader allowances than when we had the first discussion. And it was strategic, wasn't committed. So I look at, frankly, the Chamber of Commerce and Small Business, and to me, those are the most, what's the right word? The ones that are probably the most addressable in reallocation, because the small business is really to help do the same thing we're talking about on the COVID side. In the chamber, I'm not sure what the programs and directions are, and so until we have more clarity with respect to that, that's $500,000. Okay, so who's up next?
You get to go second, Rob.
Okay, all right. We'll just keep going this way.
Keep it all in mind, talking about.
Bill, do you have anything?
Oh, yeah, I got
Let's just
It's been a lot of clarity, and obviously, I had a couple questions. I was going to say, is the Chamber of Commerce, that's a small business, or is that for them to build their new building?
No, that's not for them to. If you'll remember when that discussion was had, we had
Corey
Skeets with us that day, and that was the discussion about bringing in the Black Business Investment Corporation to assist small businesses and everything from loans to grants to just general type assistance, and that was kind of the way it was described, and then it never went any further than that. I've heard had a conversation with the new chamber director, and there was even a suggestion about, workforce skills type training that they would use the money for. And so if the commission decides to move in that direction, we would have to work on what exactly are they going to program with those funds, and we would enter into a subrecipient agreement with them that would define that. But generally, the things that I just mentioned were the things we heard from the chamber with their initial request.
Thank you, because I need to go through each one of these again, probably like that, but again, that was one question I had, and of course, again, that being the case, we know that's going to be a hard one to manage, I would assume, Mike. That's going to be very expensive for us to, it may cost us $1 million versus $500,000. That may use all that $450,000 to administer that. Of course, again, when I was talking about the housing, it wasn't just do away with it per se. I didn't mean y'all get that, but when I was talking this morning when I was leaving, I told Sean, I said, I'm looking for, I'm seems to be always conservative. We need to get more rainy day funds in, which is what we're talking about there again, to expedite for, like I say, the police department, public safety or something like that. There again, I'm trying to beef that component up, give us more flexibility. We can always put it back into some of these things later on, I presume. But give me what's the web CEO? That's just going to be for, tell me what that's going to be.
Web EOC, that's our emergency operation response. Web EOC is the software platform that the state and the county and other agencies use that really gives us a better way to communicate. For instance, if you need state resources, now you go through Web EOC to request that. It's how it's managed and tracked and how expenses are kept up with. And so it's basically just the programming that we needed in order to manage our emergency response.
And the cultural arts obviously was that one group. We've allocated them, and they get to pick those 10 people or how much they give. We don't have to do that anymore. That's the group.
That money is already budgeted.
Right.
This is on top of
This
that.
is a different money.
This is on
Okay.
top of that.
Okay, so that's, I kept thinking that was,
No.
that money is allocated.
That took them from 250 to $500,000.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Because
that's.
250 is what they have now.
Okay, so it says we're getting 250 more. Okay, this is more money.
Right.
Okay. And who would,
Because that was swept like before the first recession. So that was in our budget like prior to 2008. And then when the recession hit, that got swept out completely. So we're kind of trying to rebuild.
and so Stephanie
where we
thinks,
were.
you think that should go somewhere else then?
No, she thinks it should go to the museum.
No, yeah, so, is it my turn yet?
I'm still got some questions.
You take your full turn and then I'll talk.
Thank you for that.
You take your full turn.
Yeah, and then the small business, that's just what we do for everybody anyway, is help them with grants and stuff like that, correct?
Small business, at the time that the commission kind of set aside that amount of funding, I don't recall us having much discussion on how that would be, whether it would be grant-based or, loans or what it would be. We never got to that.
It was an
Because
earmark.
again, we were having we were just putting placeholders on those funds, waiting on all these rules to be kicked out by the federal government.
But potentially heavily trackable, though. I mean, that could be something that's got to be
Right.
tracked forever.
Yeah, most of these were
Yeah.
just earmarks.
Right.
That's,
Yeah.
from my notes, going back and look, these were earmarks. The dollar amounts
Right,
and
this
those
is
were
all.
just,
Yeah.
until we have better idea, this is what we had jotted down.
Well, I'll pass the baton.
Wait for the next loop.
Mike, but again, I agree with Chad, there's a lot of things, I don't think anything on there is etched in stone, in my opinion.
No, right.
And some of them, in my opinion, can be probably wiped off. But, and I like the rainy day fund component, but, your turn.
Okay, thank you. Great job, Phil. So, as the fiscal conservative that I am, I feel like I'm saving a lot of money by, I could go with nothing except keeping the affordable housing at $1 million and the $250,000 for the museum. I am up for grabs on if we feel like some of those things, instead of just going to unfunded lost revenues and public safety, which I could get on board, showing my hand. Or I could put the 500 for the chamber and the 500 for the small business and make it $2 million for affordable housing, which would be my best, so but I need to put that $2 million for affordable housing out there, so I know that then at the end of the day, we've negotiated back to the $1 million that we've already said we're going to do, because it's my highest priority on something that I feel like has to happen. It's been our 4.5-year priority by this commission. We're on a roll with it. I don't want to lose any traction because I don't think we can afford to lose any traction. Now, on the cultural arts, I'm saving, who knows how much I'm saving on that phase 2 tracking, because it would be a lump sum towards the capital campaign. And I would argue if we didn't do a $250,000 lump sum, we wouldn't have a cultural center about to open. So
But that's not
sometimes
saying-
you need, it's my turn.
I want to make sure I'm thinking right.
No,
I want to make sure my mind is like you going. Is that for the
I'll keep
cultural arts?
going. I will keep going. We are in a negotiation, aren't we? I like to negotiate. So sometimes you need a lump sum, to really make something happen, like the cultural center. And I feel like that's one of my happiest moments, is to be able to partner with you on the cultural arts center, when a lot of people don't want to give any money towards cultural arts, even if it's red light camera money, or even if it's extra money that just came out of nowhere. Getting money for the cultural arts, Mr. Music, is no easy task. And our property taxes always go to police, because that's all our property taxes cover, is our police, and it doesn't even cover that. So if our property taxes need to be addressed because they barely cover our police, because we need more police, then that's a separate conversation, in my opinion, from these funds, which, to people who put on their quality of life surveys every year that they appreciate our parks and our culture, we don't have the beach and we don't have Disney World. I am always going to be a proponent of someone who adds $250,000 to something we already have going, a cultural center that's going to, we have reimagined our library when libraries are not going to, a lot of fiscal conservatives wouldn't even fund a library because they're dying. Instead, we leverage dollars to add Black and Brood at a public-private partnership to get it revitalized, and then we put money towards a cultural center to tell our story during a real pivotal time in our history. And then now the museum's got money, a lot of philanthropic money, and a partnership with our local college in that area, with a college president who has invested millions of dollars in new buildings, making us real attractive to people who come across the country to come to that school. And that could really be a cultural hub. I know Ms. McCarley would like us to have the RP Funding Center be an arts hub. To me, I'm a little worried that might not happen, because I see how hard it is to get $250,000 towards the capital project here in our biggest arts facility in our county, probably, and a Smithsonian affiliate. But I think that if we could say, this is how much our city loves the arts, we'd love to give it to every arts group, right? And I could give them a little apiece, but I don't think it'd have the splash and the impact. I like to work with momentum. When I see a snowball rolling, I like to get in on that, because I feel like then you see community dollars, you see public-private partnerships, you see, wow, all of a sudden then that $250,000 that went towards the capital campaign is millions of dollars into our Smithsonian affiliate museum, next to our cultural center, in our library, in our little hub next to Lake Morton, which is going to host its annual Mayfair, which brings artists from across the southeast. To me, that's a huge impact. That's not just $250,000 thrown down the drain. That is invested, in our arts for our county, not just dispersing a little bit to people who are, which is wonderful. Like, if we didn't have an opportunity to make a bigger splash, I would be all about Commissioner McCarley wanting to make sure all of our arts organizations were fully funded. To me, that never happens, and there are always going to be needs, and hopefully we can still advocate. But I think it's an opportunity for this commission to make a bigger impact. So I hope that kind of gives my rationale to why that would, it doesn't cost me any to track it, hopefully. And so I'm in for $1 million for affordable housing and $250,000 for the capital campaign at the museum. I will take all the other funds and put it into affordable housing. Or I could not spend those other funds and have it go towards public safety, like my colleagues who are interested in more public safety money. But those two are my top priorities, and I hope that I could buy some 3 other votes on those two.
Yes, sir.
So I do think the point about the new information criteria changing, that changes the picture. Had we had that information at the time, those allocations may not look the same way they do right now. To me, it's always helpful to have scenarios. If we did this, this is what it looks like. If we left the $1 million, if we put $2 million toward it, if we swept all of it and put it into undesignated, what those uses might be. So, and I don't know if you're trying to get votes today or consensus, but to me, the next step would be helpful to have some of the scenarios that we are discussing today specifically brought back to us to say, this is what it would look like if we did this. But I do think it all has to be on the table, because it would have been, had we, I think, had this discussion initially, it may have looked very different than what we have right now.
To that end, I think if you think about things that you'd want to hold fast on being on here, everything else can go to undesignated funds. That's how you reduce the costs and expenses on everything else, because it can be allocated so that we pay for everything we can with every allocable dollar of our ARPA's allowance for any capital needs that we have going forward. So really, you're looking at what would I want to not compromise on letting go, kind of with that cap. Isn't that true from your perspective?
Yes.
Okay. So maybe it's helpful for us to start to think that way and to kind of pivot on that, which is the tone you kind of set, and then you're really asking about. Would you agree that if it were in undesignated, if it weren't something you want to hold on,
Right.
you'd like to have it be undesignated and used where we're going to spend it anyway to reduce any exposure we have?
I'd like to see some of those steps of where that undesignated
Goes to.
to compare.
And so where that can happen, because we're still in the process of formulating a budget, and we've got the workshops coming up, and that'll conclude, as we know, when we get, to September, but we have our, I think mid to late July meetings, and I think that's when we'll be able to show, okay, based upon these needs and the funding for that, here are the areas where it's coming from the ARPA funds in order to keep it from being funded some other way. Now, at that point in time, if the commission doesn't like the way that those funds are being distributed for those associated capital, then I think we still have time until when, late in 24.
Have them obligated by the end of 24.
Yeah, so you would still have plenty of time then.
Just to obligate the money, not even spend it.
To obligate.
Right, but now,
Their definition of obligation, though, is you've got an encumbrance out for it. It's not just budgeted.
hey, we think we'll do it on,
You've got an encumbrance
It's gotta be.
for this.
You got it.
But when is the date in
You gotta-
24?
December 31st.
So you would still have your 24 budget in order to be able to encumber it. You would still have that option, again, if in the upcoming budget, we allocated some of this funding toward the associated capital, you didn't necessarily like the way that's done, you want to pull some of that money back, you have then the 24 budget cycle to still be able to encumber it in that budget, am I correct?
That's correct. And just remember, too, to your question, Commissioner McLeod, scenarios, we can come up with scenarios. I can make it very simple. The asks that you've received from fire and police are more than what you have here in red. So you would save, even if you just did the 12 firefighters and the small station that they're talking about, and the fire truck. Okay, just that, and if you cut the police request in half, I'm not recommending that, I'm just doing it for math's sakes, you're still going to have a shortfall in the general fund by what's in the red. So, I mean, we can do scenarios, but I'm telling you, that's what it, because we've scenarioed it out ourselves ahead of time, that's what it looks like. So the dollars that you choose not to spend will come back as a recommendation from the city manager to be spent in the general fund on those things, whether it's, the cultural arts that's currently funded or whatever it is.
But I think to your comments, it's not going to just get rolled into the general fund allocation piece, and then it got spent for something in there. We'll be able to show here, as Mike just did, we'll be able to show here's what the cost of the truck.
He's got to report it, and he's already had to start reporting it. So every dollar we spend has got to be reported, so it's not disappearing, because we've got.
But if, Commissioner, if you decided when we got to that point, well, I didn't realize we were going to allocate that much for police cars, and you don't want to, you'd rather fund the police cars some other way and do something else with ARPA, we would still have the ability to do that and designate it through the 24 budget cycle.
Yeah, that's helpful. Yeah, I think that is part of, as we consider, is it a better use of those funds, those specifics that, whether it's capital for the public safety or what other cause, that we can evaluate that and say, if I'm going to get behind, I'm not just advocating sweep it all and let's necessarily put it in undesignated funds, but maybe if that need is greater than what I feel is, while great causes that are in there, I think that's the prioritization that falls to us, and we have very vigorous debate about what's most important. But having those specifics as we get into the budget, for me, that will help.
We'll have all of those. We have to.
I'm a little confused. And maybe I'm the only one out of the 7. Because when we first did this, I did not take into consideration cultural arts, as my colleague just mentioned about cultural arts being for the situation regarding the Lakeland History Culture Center. I thought it was supposed to be for cultural arts, that the cultural arts particular components that fall under the Mayor's Arts Council.
It was.
That's what we thought at first. That's why I was asking if it even could be used.
Okay, so when I got hearing what you were saying, Commissioner Mann, then I thought, okay, now where are we going here? Because if we were tasked as a committee, as you all know, LHCC, to go raise the money for what we need to do to get that into the center open and ready to go. Well, we did it and surpassed what we were supposed to do. Thank God for the community support. But now here, this is like cultural arts. I'm thinking, okay, yeah, you can always use money for that particular center that's there as it about to open. But there's other organizations still that needs money to support their need for some cultural arts positions. So I want to make sure I got that cleared up because I was not there.
So when we talked about, we didn't talk about that being for that.
I know.
Right.
So I want to make sure I got that clear. I don't want to think about that at all. That's not even
Brought that up today,
Yes, I
first
just heard
time.
it. That's why I asked you.
Came ready.
So boom. But if I had this, I'm on the position where
I've learned over 5 years.
Commissioner Cloud is like, give me some scenarios on what can be done, because public safety is number one for me. Now, I'm not saying it's not more for nobody else. I'm not saying that, please. But as I heard, even with the discussion of the conference I just came from, the ARPA monies have come to us, as you just mentioned, my dear brother. And here we are getting these dollars that we can use for certain things. But what can we do? One thing I thought about outside of public safety was infrastructure. We got some infrastructure needs in this city. So I'm thinking, well, hey, if we're going to do what we really need to be done, those are the areas that need to be taken care of as well. Yes, we got the water situation taken care of, wastewater situation taken care of, but what about some other infrastructure needs that can be used to support and make us a little better, I guess, when it comes to infrastructure needs in our city. So that's where I am right now, because we've got these other situations that came about to help us have more, I guess, be able to use dollars even in a better kind of a way. And I will make sure we do that as best we can. But if I had to still rest on anything that's up there that we talked about initially that has not been etched in stone, but still want to make sure it stays viable, I would still say affordable housing being number one for me. And then, of course, move along accordingly. I do have a question, though. I thought small business dollars were supposed to be to help support those businesses that may have suffered during COVID.
Could be.
And see, I got that on my brain, too. Because there's still somebody that's still
Or
recuperating.
training for those small
Yeah.
businesses. I mean, it was going to be anything that would be qualifying
Yes,
in that small business right now.
right. So,
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't think that the carousel has changed my opinion or my direction.
Right.
But I do look at it and I think to myself, if and I'll pick something that we don't have, and that's the Lakeland Polo Club. right? If we had a polo club
It's
here.
theoretical.
It is theoretical.
Thank God.
Because my point is if we had this money sitting in a pile and one of you happened to love polo and said, I want to throw $500K at that.
You just have to get 3 other votes.
There's-
Lakeland didn't make it. Listen, I've proposed other things.
There you
I've
go.
lost
So-
before.
My point is when we look at those, I've been an affordable housing person. I've built them, so I love them.
Right.
I've started 2 nonprofits. I'm a member of the chamber. Those things are all important, but they're not all important to everybody.
Right.
But what is important to everybody is how much they pay for tax. And that's just what I'm going to just keep going back to is that one stroke affects everybody. And like you said, we take all that and sweep it in, it's still not enough. So we've got to go back to your point of when this meeting comes up in July, we've got to dig, right? I mean, we've got to be very, very prudent when it goes there. But I'm going to have a difficult time if someone comes up to me and they've been paying attention in full or part and say, my taxes are being raised, but I see you gave money to blank. And they couldn't care less about that. I struggle with that.
So you would rather have everything, all the ARPA funds, just go back to the general fund undesignated? That's what we have to tell everyone today. So that's your preference is everything in red, go to undesignated?
I would start there, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That means that you don't see any leveraging.
The only area, and I don't want to give her a smile, but the only area that I would go with you on the affordable
Listen,
housing.
I only need 3 people.
Yes, ma'am.
So you can be fine.
No, that would be my.
I'm counting my votes.
Would be the affordable housing. But I have not, because this was an initiative that you guys came up with before I came on. I'm not as on that train. I'm not off it, but I'm farther back in the caboose,
Yeah,
maybe. You know, I mean, I can see the value, I can see the need. I mean, I've got 3 kids about to graduate college. They couldn't afford to rent here if they tried.
No,
Right? I
no.
get that.
That's right.
But I also don't want to increase the burden on everybody by us spending money on things that not everybody cares about.
Well,
I'm sorry.
it doesn't increase their property. Their property tax doesn't cover our police. That's
You're
how
right.
low they are.
But you do agree with me. I hope you agree with me that people don't look at and necessarily understand that. They're going to look at the tax they pay and they're going to say, "Why did you spend money on this?"
And your responsibility is to have an overview of all that.
It is. Yeah, that's exactly it. And
Yes.
try
Let me
to.
jump in here. But a point to remember is that we, in the past, have supported affordable housing through the budget process. So even if we remove that 1 million, we're not saying that it's a 0 going toward affordable
Right.
housing.
Right, which I would agree with you. That's the direction I would want to head.
So that, for me, is part of that thinking. Now, it sounds like there's strong support to leave that, or maybe it's, I don't know, I think in the one-on-ones, there was an option of 500,000, in addition to what we're already putting through in the budget process, along with cultural arts
Right.
as well. So that's, even if we took all of those out,
Right.
we still have the ability to support these areas through the budget process.
So are you in favor of all undesignated, like
Oh, I-
Commissioner Music?
He's thinking still.
I would need to know more on what that,
Looks like.
what the options are, what are the specifics of, okay, if it's in undesignated, it would be spent on this. Yeah, I don't have that
Agreed.
specific in
That's
front
what
of
I
me
would
right
sit
now.
to.
So,
Yeah.
The chorus across the nation is that affordable housing is lacking in any city that we talk to. We have made an accelerated stride in this city that many cities in Florida have not done on a per capita basis. That's because we remained committed to it early on. And that is not going to wane at all for another 4 or 5 years. So our need to keep the pedal on the accelerator in the affordable housing arena and know that we have at least that many dollars or more to be able to multiply what we can get built is a huge need. And if we want people to be able to live in this city and have housing prices be at least acclimating, we've got to keep that as a very, very high
And
priority.
it's a tiny percentage compared to the $53 million that's really a $70 million project for one multifamily that's being built. To think that we could get any affordable at all for $1 million is remarkable. That's why we feel so confident in this best practice that we are investing in. So we tried multiple ways to get affordable housing, and it's just like blowing at the wind. But when you see the price, $70 million on a multifamily, and that's why your kids can't afford it. My daughter's looking to try to find a place too and can't afford it. But to think that we could, with $1 million, be able to partner with the Green Mills or a Blue Sky and get an affordable project is really miraculous. So
And
to
we have
me,
other ones knocking
tell me
on
what
the door.
else that $1 million could do, because to me, I'm all about impact. I'm always P3 leverage. How much does my $1 give me? And I'm not saying, that's why I'm not even bringing public safety into this conversation. To me, that's a general fund discussion. It is what our property taxes pay for, and if we don't have enough, then the public has to know that, and they need to make a collective decision on how much they prioritize public safety. These are federal dollars that we got because of COVID, and no one is impacted more than people who can't afford to live somewhere because of a pandemic. So to me, $1 million leverage for affordable housing in the way that we've been able to do it is such a humongous best practice and investment in our community. Now, I could see that you and Commissioner McLeod could be like, arts. That is a consensus among many people. And so I'm used to being the underdog on the arts. But I still would say that having an arts hub and partnering with Florida Southern College and the museum, and also bringing more people to that area, and hopefully they'll not just go to our museum, but they'll also go to our cultural center and understand our history a little better, because we've invested at our library, to me gets excited, because I feel like, you know what are signature things that you did as a commission, and you can say we saw best practice results in our affordable housing at a time of a global pandemic, and we were actually also able to create more of a cultural hub in our, historic downtown and partner with people who come from the arts. Now, you might not care about the arts. I think there are a lot of people who do care about the arts. I don't think $250,000 is much. It's very much, like I said, especially if I'm saying I'm going to save the $500,000 for the chamber and $500,000 for the small business and the PED connector, all the other things.
And I'm just let me interrupt you for a minute, only to say, it's not that I don't care about the arts. I do want that. It's not that I don't care about the arts. It's just that I'm representing people who they don't all care about the arts. So I've got to look at the seat that I'm sitting in and say that not all of them do.
But part of what we all advocate for, we have constituents that don't care about
My
those.
constituents, my constituents do care about the arts,
But my
and I'm standing up for them.
constituents don't care about, they want a central quality of life. Now, that may be different for different ones of us, because of what constituents that we do represent. For mine represent, I would say, want to know, hey, I got an excellent quality of life, that I can live in Lakeland, have a harmonious kind of relationship with whoever else is around the city as well, and a nice place to stay, affordable house for me, and also to keep businesses going. So I think that's where small businesses come into play as well. So that's where I continue to stay.
Just a question, do we have, Mayor, staff, affordable housing developers who are in the queue saying if we only...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We've got one of them that has 3 projects they'd love to do.
And this will...
That aren't even on the...
They can't get the state and federal money if they don't have a...
And I get that, but...
If they know that, they need a map.
I think that...
Qualify too, but...
Right, there's other factors other than just if they had $1 million from City of Lakeland, they'd be able to move forward. Everyone knows this, but the affordable housing crisis and pressures far exceed, in my opinion, the ability of local government to work our way out of this. Now, we chip away at it, and I think we've had some great success. And if we continue to have developers in the likes of the ones we've had in the past, and we can do those types of developments, then I think we can make a case for that. But sometimes I think it's just we're putting this $1 million or whatever it may be in hopes of, we can say affordable housing is a priority, but are we, as we move forward and those pressures get greater and we see what is happening on a national scale, are we really being effective with those dollars?
And
That's where I'm in.
They've got to be ready to go.
They have to be. We have those developers who are in the queue and want to continue to build.
We've all taken your turn.
Oh, I'm good. To that point, if we had, Brian's here, if we had, which he's like, what's she gonna say? If we had money to fix Highway 33 intersection at I-4, and could leverage and do shovel-ready, does infrastructure in that regard work with roads? She's smiling. Okay, I don't know how to phrase the question. It's like Jeopardy.
Let me, what my client means to say, if you were going to do that, the best way to do it would be to slide it to undesignated and look at him and say, bring me back that type of project that's an infrastructure project so that you use those dollars the way we want you to use those dollars.
So you want to keep as many undesignated as possible.
Well, it's just to answer that question.
No, I just was curious because if we're talking about when Commissioner McLeod brings up a really valid point that in the pebble of the pool of affordable housing, if we all back up and look at some of our greatest needs, and I love the arts and I love the museum too, but if we're talking about some kind of impact and we can be shovel-ready, because that's all we ever hear about at TPO is shovel-ready and municipal skin in the game.
Get it going, we'll come.
I'll put all that undesignated towards roads if you give me the $250 for the museum.
It's a
It's
card
like
game.
Monopoly. I'll buy your hotels.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And of course,
Amen to the roads.
Oh, yeah.
Wabash Extension,
and
yes.
of course, they're getting, which is we're talking about all this affordable housing, and I can't for the life of me figure out why Lakeland Housing Authority, they've got that piece of land and they're getting ready to sell. They've got a low basis in it. They got it dirt cheap. We need affordable housing right there, and they're selling it.
On Drainfield?
Yeah, and I don't know, well, Creek property, Brainfield, but Frontage Road, why they're selling it, and then what are they gonna do with the money when we need affordable housing right there, and they're selling that piece of property while they don't build something.
You probably can't.
And
You gotta go talk to, you gotta go talk to him, because they got two projects they trying to get out of the ground too.
well, they haven't asked us for any money, have they?
Not that I know of. I haven't heard about this.
They're HUD-driven,
And of
too.
course, well, and that's just, I'm just trying to make a point.
Yeah.
You know, again, we have another entity in the city that's doing the opposite of what we're trying to do, in my opinion.
Well, I think there's less concurrency on that, in that area for that project, and that's probably a principal reason why, and less desire for them to want to use it.
They could do 400 something homes there now. They're going to do 200 apartments or something like that. They're going to sell it to somebody, but invariably, I just want to bring up a little point. And of course, there again, the $17.8 million is you can get into that if you really want to.
Not wastewater.
We want
That would be a
infrastructure.
mess.
Well, I agree.
Yeah,
But I'm not trying to do that. But obviously, you know, and Mike just said, if you want to, we can. But a lot of, like I say, all the stuff in the red's on the table for the way I look at it. And so it's just a matter of, is it going to be today? Is it going to be next week? Or going to be 2 or 3 months from now? But I don't think we can make a decision today.
Well, what we can do today, and because we should provide guidance, is we should say what are some things that are the things we want to make sure we hold, and what are the rest that we do to undesignated, and then when we go to our budgeting, we can sit there and take a look at what's happened with what you found out and how those pressures and needs are, so that we have to do.
How you want to make the vote?
Okay, sorry. So, to hurry up, affordable housing, I have 4. Polk Museum of Art, I have 3. Yeah, but we didn't vote. This is my straw vote.
Oh.
I'm just being silly. Okay, Commissioner Music.
So help me understand, because, you know, when we're talking about, and even bantering back and forth, right, we've got 33 Wabash extended. I mean, we've got more projects than money. So we know that, right? And we know that before ARPA, Arts needed money, and they're gonna need it after. So we know all of this. If we take and we just give the $1 million to the affordable housing, like Commissioner McLeod, what does that look like? What am I as a representative giving to the city with that $1 million? Can somebody help me out? What does that really look like at the end of the day, 24 months from now?
So what's this multiplier?
In 24 months?
Well, okay, 36, whatever it's done, whenever the project's done, if we say that we've got people knocking on the door saying, hey, we want to build, okay, here's some land, here's some money, what do we get for that?
60 to 80 units, assuming they can get low-income housing tax credit financing or some other major fund. You heard from Elise this morning about Oak Street. We did the math on 15 affordable units, market versus 80% AMI affordable. Over 15 years, that's $2 million. difference.
Right.
That's the gap the developer is trying to solve for. So when they do a whole project of affordable, that's why during the retreat, you saw from Teresa, even the upwards of $5 million in layered incentives the city has brought to these projects, they are a pittance compared to the overall cost of developing those projects. But it's important subsidy layer. Those developers need that.
Right.
Yeah, they have support.
It's just the ifs that,
And they're
it's the
gonna go to
ifs that I
market.
struggle with. If they get this, if they can qualify for that, if they can.
Well, don't worry, if it's not spent, then we just buy a fire truck. There's plenty to spend it on. If it doesn't happen in the
the other thing is-
timeline, then they'll bring it to us and say, there's no builder to come. It's not like we can make it happen, but it shows predictability. Developers like, yes, we're going to go for this next piece of land, and we're going to go get this state and this federal. They know they could try that. But it's not like we can make it happen. We don't have a magic wand, and if it doesn't, it's still sitting there in that same line that says affordable housing, and they'll come back to us and say, it's 2024, it hasn't been spent, and we'll say, oh, well, there's plenty of fire trucks and police cars we need, spend it. You know what I'm saying? So this is our one chance to do something special before it just gets put into the undesignated, where there's more things to fund than we have money for.
And for the what-if scenario, they can't even consider it if we're not supportive.
You gotta be.
So we have to
They
have
cannot
some,
go.
they can't even go
They cannot
unless
go
the
get that
city of
state dollars.
Lakeland, they can't even be in the what-if realm if we don't step
How
up.
much do we have in our general budget for affordable housing?
$1 million, right?
That's what we have every year. We have
No,
budgeted
not
right
every
now.
year.
No, we
Well,
don't.
I'm sorry, last year.
Yeah, right.
We've been moving it up because we now have a project that we like.
That's
We didn't
between
want to just throw
CRA
money
and the
away
general
to
fund.
social
To throw it away,
projects,
right.
or we wanted leverage with private dollars.
I don't think it's $1 million. I thought it was 500,000.
$500,000 last year.
I thought it was 500,000.
We got $500 bucks, all right.
Yes, I think it's 500,000.
From general fund?
Yeah.
From general fund.
General fund.
But then we have CRA,
All right.
so that's
CRA was
was
at
it?
least 5.
Yeah,
I
so
think
that's
so.
the million.
Right.
Get 750.
750?
Yeah, I think if we get this, we'd be at $2,225,000.
Yeah.
That's what I'm,
500,000 general fund, so $1.5 million, look at it that way, but CRA can do what they want to with it.
they just use it the same way as a leveraging tool.
The real question is, should we leave it at $1 million?
Say
Real question for
say
whom?
$1.5 million.
Right.
It's really, the real number's $1.5 million.
Yeah, sure. There's no other way to get that done but to be able to have some layers of incentive to get to.
I agree with you.
And so, my recommendation would be that we keep the affordable housing at $1 million, that we would set aside the Polk County Museum of Art $250, because I think that's a good use for it, because it won't get held otherwise, and that could be net of COVID needs, so it could be $250 or $230 or whatever, and pass on the rest of it. And let it go down designated and then have a chance to revisit it.
And you could feel really good because you didn't have, look how much you saved. That went to police and fire, whatever.
You sound like my wife when she bought a discounted item. Right?
Because wives know you need beauty, and beauty is the cultural center and the museum.
I got it on
and-
sale.
It was originally $1,000.
How much you saved if you didn't
Yeah.
spend it all?
Why did you not buy 2 of them? Because they were such good deals. And listen, I agree with you. I do. I agree. You have to remember this
Judging you.
is still just so new to me, and I'm looking at it as if it were my own wallet.
Yeah.
Here's what I would do. Here's what I would do. So
We appreciate that.
Me more so than most, probably.
With the love.
You'd be surprised.
I'm not there yet with, I'm okay with affordable housing, but I'm not there yet with the designated, I think the Polk Museum of Arts would be, I guess, what was suggested. I really see it going toward cultural arts
But then you have to spend $400,000 to follow and track it. That's the only reason I'm moving to a one-time gift instead of, I'm
Unless you give
saving
it to 5 organizations.
$400,000. One-time gift versus all the,
Do 5 organizations.
We're gonna get a point where we're gonna have to, well, not have to, but we'll be asked to allocate something towards that museum.
Yeah.
This is money that's found money.
they're going to ask us to take it out of the general fund.
And it's a $10 to $12 million project, depending on how they all end it.
And we still forget about,
I haven't been asked about it, so, like, I don't feel like I can agree to just one-stop shop on that.
You mean on putting it towards,
one.
Just the museum, yeah.
One entity.
One entity.
And does the museum currently have money in the budget that they're getting every month or every
They're
year
going to do
from
a
us?
capital campaign.
Yeah, they've already started.
not from us?
So they do not have.
They don't have money.
Yes, they do.
Oh, wait. Does the museum?
To get, from the cultural arts, the 250.
No, no,
mayor's-
Holt
mayor's-
Museum of Arts. Holt Museum of Art.
They get
Right.
they get something for the mayor's culture on the arts.
They were at $80,000
Right.
2 years ago.
Right.
Right.
Of the 250, 80,000, to answer your question, sir.
Okay.
Yeah,
But there is-
But that, no, that's not a guarantee, that's an allocation
Yeah.
made by,
from the mayor's
Mayor's
council on the
council.
arts. Yes.
they have to apply for it every year.
Council, then it's been applied to
Yeah.
that.
There's a whole system
The-
that you apply
So
for.
they did get that money,
Somebody might
you're
get
correct.
$5,000.
They do every year.
And probably should.
I'm not
Get something-
disputing that. I'm answering the question
Just
of,
saying, yeah.
yeah, the $80,000 is what shows up on the spreadsheet every year from the cultural
Yeah.
arts folks that goes to the museum.
But we don't get to pick that.
No, they pick it.
Council picks it,
I'm
yeah.
just answering
But
Commissioner
it has,
Music's
but
question.
historically, that's been what has happened, you're saying?
Yes, sir.
And it was less than historically, 80.
Yes.
It was 40,000 until probably 10 years ago, and then it doubled to 80. And it stayed.
When I was on the committee, it was 80. And that's been years ago.
Okay.
I was gonna say, it doesn't sound like when I was on there, it was 80. It was like, I thought that was
It was
like
80.
10.
It was 80.
That year.
Bumped to 75.
75.
That's what I thought too. At any rate, yes, they get money. Already.
I just remember, I'm gonna, one last pull,
Bricks and mortar.
tug on your heartstring, that all that red light fund, camera money was supposed to go to the arts. Nope, didn't, because we barely got that little squeeze for the cultural center. So it's not like we're just throwing money at the arts all the time. It's really hard to ever get money for the arts, so.
Are we as a city giving money to the Bonnet Springs?
Well, only in what we have done for some allowances.
The grant,
With a big state grant.
Lori and her
Yeah.
team.
43 million.
And that's kind of my point, is we didn't, as a city, give them anything, and they were able to raise 43 million.
Right.
So, I mean, it
Well,
can
they're gonna
be
raise money
done.
for the museum, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a $100 million gift and they'll raise 25 million.
Yeah, I think so.
Just the numbers. Okay.
Yes. The endowment's starting now.
So where are you? So do you want to do, well, the only thing it sounds like, how many people would like to keep the $1 million for affordable housing? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. Are those 2 hands up?
No.
Wow. Okay, so let's talk about affordable housing then. What do you want it to be?
I'm not there yet. I think I still need more, the
Yeah.
next step. To me, it's possible, but I'm not as firm in my commitment as Commissioner Madden and you, Mayor, to say today
Right.
unequivocally.
That's how I
It's the only multiplier on the board.
Right, what
I
else
hear
are you
you,
gonna,
but I'm
what's
still
your
not- I'm
impact?
still not
And
there.
it's the only multiplier on the board
Yeah.
and the most critical need across all cities in this country.
Yeah,
And we're wanting to talk about maybe, my mind doesn't go there well.
We got a $500 million already, and we're getting 750 from the CRA, is that right, Brian?
That's right.
That's,
This is
we're
on
already
top
doing
of-
$1 million 250.
well, that doesn't really matter, because we're doing a lot of things in our general fund. This is about what are we using to impact
Well,
after a
I'm not
global
through
event.
yet. I'm not through
Yeah,
yet.
it's not property
So,
taxes.
maybe
At least we hold hands.
I'm gonna suggest $500 million more.
Let me ask a question, because listen, I believe, and I think that I'm closer than it might look like I am, but if we're talking about, do we currently have some money that we allocate towards this every year?
Yes.
We're general fund,
Well,
okay,
but
so-
we negotiate it every year, we
Okay,
fight
so,
for it.
right, okay, so if we have people that are knocking on the door and ready, what we are giving them isn't enough? Is that what you're saying? So will this $1 million, 500,000, 250, will that push it over the edge? Now we can sit back and say, that was it. That was the little push that we needed to be able to reach that. Because if that's the case, I can get behind that.
Yeah, we might get 2 projects instead of 1. We have 3 developers instead of 1 developer.
I apologize. I just get stuck by the mites. We might,
It's no different than the by rights. It's the developers got to know what do you have as an additional incentive so they can push their.
If you go looking for a house, right, you want to buy a house, and I said, oh, you want to buy a house? Then I'll give you a down payment. You're like, well, I don't know if I'll find one I like for sure. Well, you for sure won't find one if you don't have a down payment. So my gift, you can say, oh, well, you don't know for sure. Well, then I'm not going to give you the money for the down payment. And you're like, okay, well, then I can't even look. I mean, you can't go look for a house unless you have the down payment money. And I'm willing to give you the down payment money so you can go look and get the house. You might not get it. You might not find the perfect house you want, but you certainly are going to get no house if you don't have this gift that I'm going to give you for your down payment.
So the process for these companies that we have mentioned is they've got to have all of that in play before
This is not like
they
today.
even.
Right.
So today was not what we're talking about. Like to get 15 units, that was like CRA, just because we prioritize affordable housing. said
Right, I'm
in
just
our
talking about in
RFP,
general, like if we.
But when we have the developer who's qualified to go for it, they get in this round and they compete throughout the state versus other counties. So they've got to get the land, they have to get money from their city, and they have to do all these other things to be able to go then and then get in the queue, like in the round and apply for it. They might not win,
Yeah.
but they will not win if their city does not have an allocation with them on their application.
But we do have an allocation. You're telling me that we have that already. So why aren't these people that are knocking on the door going in and making this effort right now?
They are, and you could, Green Mills, Blue Sky, those folks are, but I'm just saying you could, so if you have more money, then you can get more developers an opportunity to go compete for that.
If we don't spend it.
Right, then it just sits there, and then you still can use it for whatever you wanted to use it for.
It's no different than by right to have those funds available to be leveragers and catalysts.
Yeah.
It is how fast you want to accelerate. Do you want to go someplace on a gallon of gas, or do you want to go on someplace with 8
We're
gallons?
the ones that are, they're pushing right now trying to get. Has Green Mill do you know where the property is?
Yeah, right on Parker.
That was already done, though, isn't
Well,
it?
you said, well, yeah, they just still coming out.
They've got the money for that.
What do we have in the queue,
What in
potentially?
the queue?
We have excited developers that want to do projects here that we can get done by 2026, or at least committed and out of the ground, that we need to be able to incent. But we don't have to do it.
But, Mr. Mayor, so just, because I do want to be careful, I don't want it to be thought later that staff contributed to this discussion, because likely what you would set aside for affordable housing would be some form of an incentive at some point in time, of which right now we really do not know what that would be. I mean, just like you saw today, where we contributed towards some affordable housing in a development, and there will likely be those opportunities moving forward, but we don't have a wholly affordable living development, I don't believe right now, in the queue, as the question was. It would be, however, though, available, so that just like you saw this morning and other developments like Green Mills and the like, to where we could then contribute. But with that, I think Mike may want to, I was asking Mike just a moment ago, because again, the requirements on what you can spend the funding on, and could you even contribute that toward, let's just say there was some financing type package that we were asked to, carry the burden on. I don't know that would qualify. So Mike, can you?
It does, as long as, and I confirmed it with the ladies, as long as it is constructed, completed by 12/31/26. If our $1 million went towards X number of affordable housing units, then yes.
But Mike, it could be
qualifies.
contributed in any way. I mean, it could be us providing financing. That's my question, is are there restrictions on what we could do with that $1 million toward an affordable housing project or development?
as long as it's provided to them, I don't know of any challenges. No?
Okay, all right,
I don't
good.
think so. But I do need to, when you get to the topic of the museum, I've got some clarifying information I need to bring up.
Okay.
You're still talking about affordable housing, but
I think, yeah, and I think I can slide over. I don't know that I would want to do more than $1 million.
No,
But I do think that, and again, I apologize for always asking questions and stuff like that, but knowing that the money is just sitting there,
And it's American
that they
Rescue
can't
dollars.
use it. I know, I still look at found money as money for me
It is.
to, you know.
Because it offsets your expenses.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Uses money
using
you
that
make
as
what you don't
our
spend. So,
But this actually is affordable for rescuing people.
okay, so how many, did we lose someone?
He'll be right now. He'll be right back.
All right, then let's go to to the arts, because he can hear us.
museum, yes.
Museum.
I did not realize that what you were talking about was the expansion of, I just didn't understand the project.
Got it.
That the museum is going to expand. We can't use them for that. Just like we couldn't use it for the Chamber of Commerce building, their facility. We, unfortunately, had I really understood what the project was, I would have been able to stop it sooner. I just confirmed with our friends here, and they
Would
too
it be
said.
could it be for a program?
For programs?
Yeah,
If it's COVID-related,
it's not.
they've got to distinguish their.
Okay, so.
It has to be a COVID-related expense because any of
That's
these
a big deal.
that's
nonprofits.
why I'm going back to.
Yeah, but I'm telling you,
Fashion, going back to it.
better for mayor's because if you look at the symphony, I mean, they still are trying to catch up from not having people attend COVID, you know.
So we
Those are
left
their
some portion of
moneymakers.
it it would be allocated through the mayor's council on the arts.
Can I offer an alternate thought, just for you to think about? If you wanted to help them, maybe what you do is think about it during the budget process and think of, okay, maybe you determine that $100,000 is more reasonable for a one-time to help them. I don't know what it is, but say it is that. Maybe you decide you do that through the general fund to help the Mayor's Council of the Arts.
But then we fight with Commissioner Reed on that because he'll say no. The general fund
Right.
going to arts, right?
Whatever. I mean, I'm just saying, if you wanted to try
We use the
to.
general fund mayor council for the arts as a one-time gift for the capital campaign, and then we use this
No,
to
no,
go.
no, no. I'm not saying play shell games.
Council has they have a rubric in place.
I have to sign those
But
documents.
That's a good thought.
But
But
I'm
what
just.
but could you also say, could you drop it down to 200 grand or 150 and say it's going to be for, you need to say it like 5 projects, 5 applications versus, nickel and diming and having all the KPMG work that would cost if you had 10 organizations, could you do it that way?
The top 5 projects, you could pick
Get the
some.
top 5 and then divide it out.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, absolutely. You can do that. What I was trying to do was trying to help you with the 450 that we had as a placeholder up there.
Got it.
The fewer that you give out as
Right.
one-time projects here and there, you just lower that amount. We'll manage however many you say, we'll manage them. Just know that we're going to need to ask you all those questions if you decide to give to these
Well,
either
and-
way. We got to stay today to ask those questions. if
I'd like to
possible.
leave it in as 250 for the cultural arts because the same thing holds true with affordable housing, that if it's not used, if people don't know, if the organizations, the framework says you have to apply for COVID-related and nobody applies for COVID-related, well, then you have that 250 that kicks back that has to be used by the end of 26, or
Right,
24.
and they have to have justification for all the COVID-related expenses.
For which program?
If it were an
Any
art,
kind of arts organization that applies for the grant through the Mayor's Council on the Arts.
When we develop the draft for the application of the
Right.
guidelines, there's a set number of documents that we would
Right.
request for them to justify upfront if they're even an eligible applicant.
Right.
And then another of the questions that we had, to your point, was if you had a set location per application, is it going to be max 15,000
Right.
or is it 2,000? Because that also is going to tell you, and you may only have 5 applicants, and then are you going to give 15,000 to them and then allocate the rest somewhere else, or are you just
Right.
going to divide it evenly?
Yeah.
It's going to tell you the level of monitoring also, depending on how many subrecipients you have.
I mean, because and then the same thing holds true, then it kicks back in if nobody can access it, so say somebody applies and through the framework, they're like, you're not even capable, able to apply for this, then you don't have to have the monitoring, so you don't have the KPMG extended cost, you have the upfront cost of setting up the rubric, right, and the application.
And I will say we have developed a draft, again, everything's still draft,
So you're not
monitoring
starting from
plan. So if monitoring is not something on the table for phase 2, you are being set up to take monitoring in-house. But based on that, it included monitoring and the implementation of it. There's a lot of question marks about it. So if you set it up, then you'll have the monitoring plan
Hey.
for it.
There she is.
Wow, you look like you just flew in. That's right. All right, so let's do two things. Let's do a vote on $1 million on affordable housing. How many people would want to have that hold as a commitment? Raise your hand.
One said 1 million.
1 million.
1 million.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. On affordable housing, 250,000. I'm sorry, on, I know what I mean, I just can't say it.
Mike's like, no, I said 1 million.
Mayor Council on the Arts at 250, that we would look at allocation with grants to COVID justifiable, so it'd be 250 or a maximum of 250 in utilization, probably be something less. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so not a majority. So
Talk about some more.
Okay.
You might win me over because I'm still stuck with another area I'd like to see some money appropriated.
Why don't you tell us what it is?
And
Yeah.
those small business nonprofits. And I still feel are struggling, as I heard Commissioner Carter say, we don't know what everybody is now. We say, okay, it's been 24 months plus. But I still hear folks saying they still in need of dollars of funding to keep their nonprofit door open, to keep your staff going, keep things that they may have struggled with, of course, during the COVID time still. And I know we had dollars appropriated for it, but, if I hear what's going on at this table, nobody's even saying anything about it at all.
So is it the not-for-profit side or small business side?
We have a slash on it.
I know.
Yeah, small business / non-for-profit.
So which side are you representing in this conversation?
Which would you prefer?
I prefer nonprofits.
I think that's more manageable, really, because once you start to open it up to small
They're
business,
used
it
to-
goes
I
wide.
prefer.
And they're used to grants.
Well, I call it small business nonprofits where it's listed,
Right.
but I would prefer nonprofits, yes.
And how much would you recommend for that?
250.
Okay.
Versus 500.
I thought it was 250, wasn't it? Well, I think it was 5 because we had small business there. But it's
How much we giving them already?
No, you're good, thank you.
We had 500 up there.
250.
How much do we give?
You get more vote.
we had 500 because we had small business.
So make it
and nonprofits.
250, cut it in half.
250.
Okay, that's, NFPs. How many people, any other conversation on that?
They get a lot of my friends that have small businesses, they got all kind of money from COVID difference,
Right.
federal funds and all kinds of stuff.
Nonprofits.
No,
He's talking about
I'm
small
not
business. He's augmenting.
And I don't know if it was nonprofit or not, but I know they're in business and they got rent subsidies, they got
Payroll protection.
all kind of
I've been in
different things.
nonprofit business before, that's not fun.
Whether it's a business profit or non-profit, it's different.
I would just not set up for a
But I know the
not-for-profit.
businesses have gotten a lot of money. What I thought was a lot of money. But I don't know if it was non-profit or not. But I would be more apt to do non-profit than
Not-for-profit.
Not-for-profit,
Yeah.
correct.
And do half, 250.
I could live with that because that was one of my check mark pieces there.
Chad, any-
I'm still staying with wanting to see it all considered and undesignated, so.
I would not. But my question is if we take the money and put it into the nonprofit, I mean, unless we know exactly what we're going to do with it, we certainly are opening our, to, a ton of just tracking and stuff like that. If we knew one, am Am I wrong? Is that, because I mean, if
No,
you.
you're right, but
Yeah.
I was just gonna add in though, but if the parameters are set in such a way that they don't need it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
then they are not eligible because they're, and most nonprofits know how to do that because you can't
They won't apply.
I can't apply as the Randy Roberts Foundation to certain things because I'm an educational thing. I'm not an arts organization, so then if I kicked into the arts part, they'd be like, yeah, no, you're not eligible. So and there might be, and this is the thing that I'm wondering, and as Commissioner Walker said, like, I think we're making assumptions that people are all okay.
Yeah.
And maybe they are, and so if they are, then that money sits, then we just reallocate that money. You know what I'm saying? Like, then it gets kicked back into the big bucket.
And did you track this conversation?
Yes, I'm inclined to do the million for affordable housing and all the rest undesignated.
Okay, so then I'll ask the question, how many people are in support of $250,000 being set aside for not-for-profits? Raise your hand. One. Okay, one. All right, so are there any other areas that we're missing that somebody wants to advocate towards?
Do we need to vote on cultural arts?
We did.
We did.
It was 3.
Did we say if we could go towards roads?
Said nothing else.
Like,
All we have so far is
do we have a
affordable housing.
road that we could allocate it towards, like a Wabash extension or anything that would be shovel-ready to do, or no?
Probably shouldn't.
I have a meeting at 3:30 with much smarter people than me that are going to be talking about that very project, and I was invited to help with funding. So
I would love
I think we'll have an answer on that, but I don't know timing on the December 24 and December 26 to answer that question, but I would probably kick it to Sean and say, he probably would want to show you a prioritized list of projects that we have out there. You might be able to, if you brought the rest down to undesignated, then he would probably want to bring those back to you.
33
And that's back to the budget
Yes.
discussion, which is we will take whatever ends up in that unallocated and propose where that could be spent, and whether that's toward the public safety expenses or transportation or a combination. And then, that can be the solution to some of those funding needs, but certainly through the budget process, you'll have the opportunity to reallocate. The only important part of that is the timing, it's got to be something we can complete by the 26 requirement.
Well, and Highway 33 is programmed out for 23, or 2023, because of the gas line and everything, so that could fall into the window.
Sure, I think there's all kinds of ways of tackling pieces of that project, right? So, maybe there's land acquisition. That's one piece of that project, right? But again, that's something that would happen during the budget process if in fact you decide that you want to go that route, because we need to provide the scenarios that Commissioner McLeod asked about, right? We'll know better what Ms. Fox tells us our values are, and then we'll have a better idea on police and fire asks, as well as the pay study-ish that Sean's talked about, and have it all back for you, as well as potential projects for you to consider, if in fact you go that route.
So if we're not, yes, Commissioner Walker.
So right now, we want to end just the 1 million for affordable housing, okay?
On that basis-
Out of our $22 million to rescue people from COVID, we have spent $1 million on affordable housing. I don't think you need to feel bad about that.
With respect to things up there like Chamber of Commerce, 400. With respect to
Conservative.
With respect to the Chamber of Commerce, where we have already talked to them about the $500,000 when they made the request earlier, we need to make sure, and I would be happy to do this or however we want to, is to have them recognize this is all off the table. And so anything that they're going to request from us has to be re-requested. Okay. And you're all good with that?
Do we know if
There's nothing committed.
there's
at this
nothing
point.
that they have done effort-wise to gear up for whatever we
Yeah,
commit?
put us in, yeah.
Not to our knowledge as of
Okay.
today, no.
No, and that goes back to what Commissioner McCarley said at the beginning, is she feels like we've kind of, led the cart a little bit, and So I appreciate that
No,
for sure. But
and like, to me, I wanted a boiler for the homeless shelter during the actual emergency, and so here we are, and we're kind of past the emergency, and to me, it's frustrating, because that's what these funds were really for. So that's why I came prepared to ask for something that I felt was brick and mortar, or something that was an impact, piece. So I will still have the same mindset with regard to
Sure,
when it goes to undesignated.
And I think we all do. Look,
Yeah.
the wonderful thing about this commission, this is a conservative commission. We don't like to spend
No.
money or
Right.
waste, and we're not fighting any of that. It's just that we also want to make sure we leverage our opportunities wisely.
But be able to even support and help those that may not
Right.
need.
Does Florida Avenue something we're going to pay for too?
No, I mean, we don't know, because we don't know what the final decision
That
is.
might be
Yeah,
some,
true.
that might be money we have to
Totally.
spend money on. Because when we had the red light money, I didn't think we should have spent any of it.
You're talking about if we would do our build-outs.
Right.
Oh, yeah, no, that could be.
But there's another whole entity of something.
Oh, yeah, but it's in the CRA.
It's in the CRA.
Yeah, it's in the CRA.
General fund wouldn't likely be asked to pay for anything.
Which is
There.
wonderful.
It's all in the CRA.
Okay.
Been better.
Anything else? Thank you so much for your
Let me
time.
just,
Well,
we've got
You got questions to answer.
it's my two.
I'm sorry, you out.
So the 1 million for affordable housing stays committed. 250,000 for the cultural arts through, that's coming out?
Is there a mix?
So we changed that, not going to.
One thing.
enterprise.
That's all they want, Sean.
So everything else is going down. Well, okay, all right.
Easy.
All right. So, some questions, and Deidre, you jump in, Earl, you jump in on questions that we need to get answered as to how we're going to define finding who receives this money. Okay. Did you kind of put it together? You want to jump into it?
Yes.
Would you like to sit at the table?
Please.
We would love you
Please,
here.
please.
Make a home.
You're comfortable, we like it.
So there were several authorized uses for affordable housing. We just listed a few of them, just to give you some ideas on what the money could potentially be used on. So funding of utility costs and arrears for homeowners/renters. I believe housing currently has a program that is providing funding for rent assistance and utility
So
costs.
they do.
Repair of public housing, homelessness assistance, home repairs, weatherizations, and construction of affordable housing, whether it be multifamily units or individual houses.
I think in most of our conversation, we were talking about the final bullet.
Construction, yeah. That's most of our company.
Any other input on that?
Perfect.
Okay.
I see a lot of people that need some, even in different areas, there's home repair. I don't know if people have the money for roofs that are, is this gotta be, it's gotta be affordable housing. How do they prove they need assistance?
They would have to,
It's going to be in the QCT, right?
yes, or anyone who would otherwise qualify for any current CDBG or federal housing assistance will qualify under this program.
Can you give me a parameter?
The housing is whatever percentage of median area income that will qualify them for current CDBG funding. They would also qualify for these funds.
Which is probably 50% AMI.
I'm not sure what, it's
80%.
80%. Yes.
I think Commissioner Reed's viewing this list as exhaustive, and y'all are
This is
saying
not,
Right. this-
only the bottom bullet is
Right.
what you want to
These are
designate.
Well, I'm looking at all of them
He's
right
asking
now.
more.
I'm
But these
looking
are
at all of
all-
them myself, but,
the 450, right? If you found one or two or three, to Commissioner Madden's point, that you were able to get monies to the Green Mills or whomever, that may become easier. Or, is the Housing Authority building something right now or in the future that you could, and it'll be done in time? If you don't have any other options,
Right.
can you provide it to them? Because they know the rules with this type of stuff better than we do for tracking, but that's another option for you anyway. That's way out of my realm.
Where's the other? We've got little amounts.
Do we have a public housing project that needs something done?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Do we have a public housing project that needs a new roof or something that we don't have money for?
The housing authority would be able to determine that. I'm sure they have needs in their housing inventory.
They're gonna get a lot of money here in a few minutes, maybe use that money. I don't know what they're gonna do with it, that's what we're talking about, but, I'm just wondering, I'm not necessarily restricting it to the affordable, the new housing. It could, a lot of people, our local citizens, a lot of people are gonna come in and rent. Our local citizens need help. Not somebody's coming into town and gonna rent a new place.
The other ARPA monies? They're actually,
Not ARPA money. That's our annual CDBG and home entitlements. A portion of that funds an owner-occupied rehab program. We've done that for 4 decades or more.
so that program is going on right now as well.
Have we run out of money in it?
There is more need than there is funding.
But there's still monies right now, right?
There's still money at the county level too.
Right.
So what we lose is the multiplier if we take it off the bottom bullet. And so it'll consume it and help, there's no question, but you don't get the ability to.
Well, I understand that. I'm just looking at our local citizens versus somebody who.
Well, there are people.
Well, I know people are moving around, but invariably, I know my sister-in-law like to get her kids out of the house.
That's exactly what I'm thinking.
They can't afford to do.
Music and that one too.
We just want people to live in their own homes. There's a reason for this.
So it sounds like what Deidre's
The bottom bullet.
saying, if in fact you just choose the last bullet, construction of affordable housing, that's probably enough for us right now to work with community and economic development, right?
Are we going to find a project, or are we just going to, how does that look?
It would be an incentive for a project, yes.
But are we defining an application that they have to, because somehow we have to have parameters?
Yeah, we will likely run it through the same sort of application process that the home ARPA monies that we just got is going through.
Okay, so we don't have to define a separate one then? Good.
Question on that, Mr. Mayor?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
So if we have this money set aside and we know this is the direction we really want to throw some stuff at it, are we allowed to reach out to the groups that we have done stuff with in the past and say, we have this available, or do we have to do?
We just did.
But I mean, so we don't have to do RFPs or whatever to have them do that. I mean, we can literally call somebody up.
We need to do our.
Okay.
We will go the extra step of making sure those that we have dealt with in the past know about it. But
So it's both and. Okay, thanks.
why?
Okay, next slide.
That's it.
Oh, you made it sound like we had all kinds of stuff to
we were all
say.
The rest were in case you went to the other ones, but this was really, we just need to make sure that we knew exactly what you were wanting.
Okay, thank you.
Ladies, without asking you to say something you shouldn't say, is there anything we are missing on the affordable housing that we should ask the commission of while you're here?
That was probably the one we had the least amount of questions. We were
Okay.
ready with a plethora of questions for every single one. This one, it was, again, just, I know there was a question on mobile housing units, but I don't think there's anything from us on
Mobile homes?
mobile homes. I think you had a question on that, but I think we.
Yeah, that was brought up when we initially talked about it.
for this. After your fifth time
Mobile
through, you'll
home areas
see
that-
how, like, at the end of the day.
That thing slipped, sorry about that. Pardon me.
Use legendary few requests and go all in for that, because at the end of the day, you get nothing. You get nothing. At the end of the day, you get nothing.
I love these chairs.
Seriously, because what if I said
Love these chairs. The
where
wobble.
does that come from?
Right.
Nowhere. It never comes. Even if it's extra federal ones.
They know that. Okay,
What about the museum?
They thought he had.
I mean,
I think Mr. Broussard wants to talk.
I was just going to say, I think we've got our questions answered.
We're still gonna have the same.
Right.
So if there's nothing else, we're good unless there's something else you need, and then we'll kind of summarize it and get it back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Strauss. Anything else?
No, thank you very much. Been a long time getting to this point, and we'll be having more discussions and more detail when we get into budget about where the general expenditures are going to be proposed to be spent.
And thank you for allocating your afternoons this way. Really appreciate it.
Just think if we went through everyone, all of them, it's a long list.
Yeah.
It'd be here even longer.
Yeah.
Thank you.